They say heartbreak is loud, but mine came in silence. No tears, no screams, just the hollow sound of my breath fogging up the church window as I stood outside, watching her glide down the aisle, wrapped in lace I'd secretly paid for, toward the man she chose instead of me. She didn't know I was there. She didn't know the ring on her finger was cleared with a loan I took in her name when her account was empty. She didn't know the flowers, the venue, the 5-tier cake, all of it had my fingerprints hidden beneath receipts no one would ever see. Because when she left me, I said nothing. I smiled, nodded, and wished her well, jobless, exhausted, pretending to be fine. But what she didn't know was, I had the job offer letter the day she walked away. I just wanted to see if she'd stay when I had nothing. She didn't. Now she wears a gown stitched from my sacrifices, and I wear a silence heavier than any suit I've ever owned. But this story isn't about a man who lost, it's about the man who paid, and what happened when the bill finally arrived. The morning light bled softly through our beige curtains, the ones she said made the apartment feel warm like Sunday mornings. It didn't feel warm today, it felt like goodbye. Her suitcase thudded against the wooden floor, not loud, not angry, just final, like someone placing the last nail in a quiet coffin. I sat on the edge of the bed, the sheets rumpled beside me, still holding the scent of her lavender skin oil. The email was open on my laptop. Subject, formal offer, position confirmed, salary, relocation package, office with a skyline view. Everything I had worked for, everything she said we could finally celebrate. But she didn't know. Because I hadn't told her yet. And I should have. God, I should have, but her voice cracked the air before I could speak. I can't wait forever for you to figure things out. Not cruel, not even cold, just tired. I turned slowly. She was standing by the door, one hand wrapped around the handle, the other gripping her coat like she didn't want to feel the room anymore. Her eyes were dry, mine weren't, but I didn't let them fall. So that's it? I asked, barely above a whisper. She exhaled, not like someone relieved, but like someone who'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. I waited through every rejection email, every time you said maybe next month. I waited when you skipped our anniversary to study for that second interview. I waited when my friends said I should have left months ago. She took a breath. But I realized, you're not stuck, you're choosing to stay behind. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or hold her face in my hands and show her the screen. Look what just came in. We did it, I did it, for us. But her voice, it wasn't waiting, it wasn't questioning, it was already gone. So I didn't say anything, I didn't stop her. She turned, pulled the door open, and just like that, sitas. He stepped out. No backward glance, no pause in her step, not even a memory clinging to her heels. And still, I sat there, motionless. The email was glowing back at me, a future, polished and gold-plated, but I had no one left to tell. My hand moved on its own, the cursor hovered over accept, I clicked, and just like that, I said yes to everything, except her. The silence afterward was unbearable, not because she was loud, but because her absence rang louder than any alarm. I walked into the kitchen, her favorite mug still sat by the sink. Make it happen, it read, a gift she gave me when I failed my third interview. I touched the rim, still faintly warm from the tea she didn't finish. I wanted to scream into it, but I didn't. Instead, I washed it, set it upside down on the drying rack, like maybe that would undo something. Later that day, I found the scarf she left behind. The olive green one I once bought when I still had enough in my wallet for wants, not just needs. She'd worn it the day she introduced me to her parents. Said it made her feel soft, but serious. I held it to my face. It didn't smell like her anymore. It smelled like time. I sat at the window as the sky began to drizzle. Funny how breakups always seem to come with rain, as if the weather knows when to cry for you. I watched the cars pass below, people huddled under umbrellas, lovers sharing coats. And somewhere out there, she was walking away, free of my silence, free of the weight of waiting. And me? I had a job now, a title, a path, everything she thought I couldn't give her. But none of it felt like victory, because none of it had her. A single notification blinked on my phone, a message from my new employer. Welcome to the team, orientation begins Monday. I stared at the screen, then back at the door. She didn't know what she walked away from, and I didn't stop her to find out. Because deep down, some part of me knew she didn't want me anymore. She wanted proof that I could be something, someone, and I was, just not fast enough for her. The job would go on, the salary would grow, the apartment would change, but that moment, the one where I could have stopped her, would live in me like a scar. Not because I lost her, but because I finally became the man she wanted, the moment she stopped loving him. 3 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and old ghosts. The office lights were colder than I imagined. The skyline outside my new window looked impressive from 30 floors up, but somehow emptier than I had hoped. The first thing I bought with my paycheck was a mug, white porcelain, no quotes, just silence, the kind that stays warm even when the coffee goes cold. I thought I was starting over. I thought I'd turned the page. But grief doesn't come knocking anymore, it just appears. Like her name on my phone screen at 2:14 p.m., on a Thursday that was otherwise ordinary. Call from Emilia. I stared at it. My hand froze above the keyboard. I didn't answer. I let it ring out once, twice, then stop. A minute later, a message followed. No greeting, no, how are you? Hey, I hate asking this, but I'm in a little financial trouble. That was it, no punctuation, just pressure. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand, but because I hoped I'd misread it. But no, she wasn't calling because she missed me, she was calling because she needed something I had now, something she didn't believe I could earn when she left. Her next texts followed like bullets. Venues asking for another deposit. Dad's not helping anymore. Savings are gone. Also, the ring. There's still a balance. No apology, no warmth, no memory of what we used to be. Just invoices, dressed in lowercase desperation. I typed a reply. Paused, deleted it, then typed again. Let me handle it. Send. 3 dots blinked, then disappeared, then blinked again. Thank you, seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you. I reread that line. It should have meant something, it used to mean everything. But now, it felt like she was talking to a customer service rep. Not the man who once held her through panic attacks, not the man who once memorized the exact wobbesuit. Her hand curled around a mug when she was cold. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then I opened my banking app. I didn't hesitate, just wired it. The amount didn't sting as much as the reason. That night, it rained. Harder than it had in weeks. The kind of rain that sounds like nails against glass. I left the lights off and watched it from the balcony. The city blurred into streaks of gold and wet gray. I thought about the first time she cried in front of me. Her grandfather had passed. We weren't even official yet. But she called me and said, I don't know who else to call. I showed up with flowers from a corner shop. She didn't want them, she just wanted someone to sit with her while the sky fell. And now I was the one she called when her budget cracked, not her heart, just her wedding spreadsheet. It was strange. How quickly love could shift from sacred to service. From shared moments to shared bank accounts I didn't belong to. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't wonder if I had anyone to come home to. Didn't ask if I'd eaten, or if I still couldn't sleep on my left side, because that's where she used to rest her head. She didn't ask, because she didn't need to. She'd already replaced me. All she needed now was the version of me that paid bills. The next day, she sent a voice note. I'll pay you back, I promise, everything's happening so fast, and I didn't expect it to be this overwhelming. Anyway, thanks again, you're amazing. I played it once, then again. Her voice sounded different, not because of a cold, but because I wasn't hers anymore. There was no tremble, no pause, no intimacy in her tone, just efficiency, like she was sending a thank you to a vendor, not the man who once whispered forever into her hair beneath trembling stars. That weekend, I bought her favorite cake from the bakery downtown, out of habit. I didn't even realize what I'd done until I got home and set it on the counter. 2 forks, no guests, just silence staring back at me. I tossed it in the trash. I thought about texting her, telling her I had the job when she left, that I was 1 email away from everything we dreamed of, that she didn't need to run, she just needed to wait. But I knew she wasn't calling for the truth. She was calling for a transaction. And I had already paid in full. The rain eased by morning. But inside me, something heavier began to fall. Not tears, not anger, just clarity. She wasn't mine anymore, but her problems still wore my name. And the part of me that kept saying yes was the part still holding on to a version of her that didn't exist anymore. Next time she calls, I'll still answer. But one day, I won't. And that silence, the one she never noticed, will be the loudest bill she's never ready to pay. Ixio. He looked like the kind of man who always knew the perfect wine to pair with dinner. Clean suits, clipped smile, polished confidence like a trophy polished too often. His hand rested on her waist in every photo, not possessive, just practiced. I remember the first time I saw his face. It wasn't in person, it was on her feed. Brunch with someone who makes Sundays feel like Saturday nights, captioned beneath a photo of him, grinning across from her at a sunlit rooftop cafe. She wore the same pearl earrings I once gave her, the ones she said made her feel soft, but not small. Now they dangled above the collar of a dress I'd never seen before, her smile tilted just a little too perfectly. A smile meant for performance. The comments flooded in. "You two are perfect. He's a keeper. So happy for you, Em." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even remembered. He had a kind of presence I never did. He looked good in crowds. He said the right things. His hair always obeyed him. She used to tell me, "I don't care if you're not the loudest in the room. I love that you're mine when the room goes quiet." But I guess rooms stopped going quiet for her. Now, they echoed with rooftop laughter and clinking glasses. Photos framed by fairy lights and filtered through golden hour edits. But he didn't know. He didn't know how she clung to me the night her father collapsed in the ER, her hands shaking, nails digging crescent moons into my skin. He didn't know she once stood in my kitchen at 2 a.m., red-eyed and barefoot, rearranging every bullet point on my resume because, "You undersell yourself, you always do." He didn't know how I held her through every panic attack, how I memorized the rhythm of her breath to calm her. How I'd whisper, "You're safe," again and again, until she finally believed it. No, he gave her presents, a shiny now, a polished today. I gave her legacy, a future stitched in struggle, a tomorrow built in silence, but she never posted those pictures. I once caught a glimpse of them together in person, by accident. They were walking out of a bookstore. I was across the street. He carried her bag. She leaned into him like she used to lean into me, as if gravity meant something different when love was new. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, and looked through me like I was just another pedestrian carrying regrets instead of books. I didn't cross the street. I didn't wave. I just stood in the rain with my coffee going cold, watching the version of her I used to love someone else. That night, I opened the folder on my computer labeled Us. I shouldn't have, but grief makes fools of archivists. There she was, no filters, no captions, just us, cooking burnt pancakes in pajamas, holding hands in hospital hallways, laughing in blurry motion, caught mid-breath by a timer that always went off too soon. None of those photos had likes. They weren't for sharing, they were for remembering. But now, even I wasn't sure who they belonged to. I tried to hate him. God, I did. But how can you hate someone for offering what you couldn't when it mattered? He showed up with job security and a tailored laugh. I had trembling hope and unpaid electricity bills. It wasn't a fair fight. It never is. Love, after all, doesn't measure loyalty, it measures timing. And I was 3 weeks too late. One evening, I received a forwarded message from a mutual friend, a picture of her engagement ring, big, bold, and painfully unfamiliar. The caption read, "He proposed on the rooftop, I said yes to forever." I stared at it for a long time, not at the diamond, but at her eyes. They were smiling, but not glowing. It was subtle, but I knew her too well. There was a strain behind the sparkle, like someone who'd learned to rehearse happiness for the camera. Or maybe that was just me projecting. Still, it haunted me. Because I remembered how her eyes used to light up over the smallest things. A shared inside joke, a cold pillow. A message that simply said, "Made you tea, come home." Now her glow was bought, filtered, framed. I didn't reach out, didn't congratulate, didn't comment. I just closed my laptop and sat in the dark. The air conditioner hummed like a broken lullaby, and I realized something brutal. She had moved on, but not up. He gave her a stage, I gave her the script. But she only remembered the curtain call, and still, some nights, I wonder, when the cameras are off, when the parties fade, when no one's watching, does she ever scroll back? To the photos no one else saw, to the version of love that wasn't posted, to the boy who paid in silence, not for attention, but for forever. X on sis. It came in at 9:03 a.m., a quiet buzz on my phone, nothing dramatic, no confetti, no champagne, just a number, just a balance, but to me, it was more than money, it was proof that I had finally become the man I told her I'd be. 3 years. 3 years of rejections, night shifts, borrowed pride, and ramen with too much water. 3 years of, don't worry, I'll figure it out. And I had. I sat there in my small but clean apartment, sunlight streaming across the floor like a curtain drawn back on a new scene. I didn't smile, not yet. I was waiting for someone to be proud of me. To say, you did it. To say, I always knew you would. But instead, my phone buzzed again. Can you help the photographer? He's threatening to cancel, we're short. No hi, no, how are you? No congrats on the new job by the way. Just that, a bill wrapped in a sentence. I stared at the screen. I read it once, then again. I waited for something to change, as if rereading her words would somehow reveal something hidden, a subtext of care, a fragment of affection. There was nothing. She hadn't asked about my first day, hadn't asked if I was okay. She hadn't even remembered that this was the moment I'd dreamed of since the day she walked out. I wanted to ask her, do you know what today is for me? But I didn't, because I already knew what today was for her. Her wedding was approaching, and all she saw in me was someone to keep the lights on when her spotlight flickered. I wired the money, no questions, no receipt, no, I'll pay you back. Just silence, the kind of silence that doesn't echo anymore because it's used to being ignored. I didn't ask for credit, didn't leave a trace, because I knew my name didn't belong in her love story, only my wallet did. That night, I went to the store and bought the cheapest instant noodles I could find, not because I couldn't afford more, I could now, but because I'd already spent the only thing that had ever made me feel full. Her. I sat cross-legged on the floor, no dining table, no framed photos, just a half-assembled bookshelf and a city outside that didn't care who I used to be. I ate in silence, fork scraping against plastic, steam rising like a ghost I didn't ask to see. Out of habit, I opened her wedding website. She had sent me the link months ago, back when things were still complicated, back when we were still pretending we could be friends without bleeding. It had changed. New pictures, new memories, new him. There she was, in his arms, laughing in a sun-drenched vineyard. Her dress flowed like a promise. The light hit her eyes like she'd never once cried over someone who didn't have enough. And the photographer, the one I just paid, he'd done a good job. The shots were beautiful. Painfully beautiful. I stared at one for a long time, the two of them under a cherry blossom tree, petals falling like confetti. His hand on her cheek, her eyes closed, like she'd never loved anyone else. My laptop screen dimmed, but I didn't move. I sat there, warm noodles forgotten, going soft in the bowl, and wondered how it's possible to feel this hollow when you're finally full. I thought about calling someone, telling them. I got my first paycheck today. But who do you call when the only person you want to tell is the reason it doesn't feel like a celebration? Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, a dry storm, no rain, just sound and the threat of something breaking. I closed the website, not in anger, but in surrender. I'd spent the day becoming someone worth celebrating, and the night, funding a life I wasn't invited to witness. I wonder if the photographer knew that the man who paid him wasn't in the pictures. It was a Wednesday. Overcast, the kind of sky that couldn't decide whether to cry or hold it in. I was mid-email, half distracted, when the message pinged onto my phone, from Amira, a friend of hers, once ours. Are you coming? I stared at it, blinking. Where is it coming from? No punctuation, no emojis, no context, just a quiet assumption. She replied in less than a minute. The wedding, obviously. Everyone thought you'd be there. And that's how I found out. Weeks before the vows. Through someone else's casual question. I hadn't received an invitation. Not in the mail, not in my inbox, not in passing. Not even a text pretending to be considerate. The boy who paid the deposit, who cleared the photographer's invoice, who wired silent support into every hidden crevice of that celebration, didn't make the guest list. I reread the message like it would eventually morph into something different. A mistake, maybe, a joke, a follow-up saying, "Oh my God, how could she forget you?" But nothing came, just silence. Not even a confirmation that I'd ever existed in her life, except as a number on her bank statements. That night, I opened the drawer beside my bed. Buried under old receipts and tangled charger cords was the envelope, still sealed. Saint, ill heavy. Her save the date. She'd handed it to me in person, months ago, when we were still pretending kindness could erase history. I'd never opened it. Because back then, it hurt too much to see a date that used to belong to us. Now, I slit it open with a key I no longer used, and read it like a stranger. Join us in a celebration of love. 2 names, not mine. A location, a time. An RSVP deadline I never received. A space I was never meant to fill. I didn't reply to Amira, I just left the chat. I wasn't angry, not really. It was worse than anger, it was clarity, the kind that wraps around your chest and sinks in like frost under skin. But I still went. Not out of pride, not out of hope. But because some part of me needed to see the end of the story I funded. I dressed in navy, not black, I wasn't mourning, at least, that's what I told myself. No tie, just a pressed collar and steady breath. The drive to the venue was quiet, I didn't play music, I didn't make excuses to turn back. I just followed the road to where love had led her, even if I was never meant to arrive. The venue was everything she once described on a cold night over microwave popcorn. A garden laced with fairy lights, chandeliers hung from trees, white chairs arranged like rows of good intentions. It looked like a dream, her dream. One she once said she'd only walk through if it was me waiting at the end. But the aisle stretched toward someone else now, and all I could do was watch from beyond the hedges, like a ghost who hadn't figured out he'd died yet. Guests began to arrive, faces I recognized, friends we'd shared. No one noticed me, or if they did, no one waved. Maybe they didn't know, maybe they did, and decided to honor the silence she'd given me. I stood near a stone fountain, far enough from the path, close enough to hear laughter. It didn't hurt like I thought it would, it felt quiet. Like standing in a museum beside a painting you once posed for, only to find someone else's name signed at the bottom. Then the music started. I knew the song. She used to hum it in the shower, said it made her feel like something beautiful was about to begin. The crowd turned, phones rose, a gasp. And there she was. Draped in the gown I'd helped fund, veil trailing like a whisper, eyes locked ahead, not even glancing at the crowd, as if the only thing real was the man waiting for her. She looked radiant, but not untouched. There was a tension in her smile, a flicker in her posture. Like even she knew something was missing. I watched as her fingers curled around the bouquet. The same shade of peonies she used to say reminded her of spring in her mother's garden. She didn't know I called the florist when the colors got mixed up. Didn't know I corrected it behind the scenes. Didn't know I kept giving, long after she stopped asking nicely. And now, as the vows began, I turned. Not because I couldn't bear to watch, but because I already had. The night she left. The night she chose someone else, before I got to become everything she wanted. I walked to my car, the wind had picked up, leaves skittered across the asphalt like they were running from something they couldn't name. I sat in the driver's seat, hands unmoving. And somewhere inside the venue, they were probably saying, forever. But forever doesn't mean the same thing when it's paid in silence. I drove away before the first kiss, because I didn't need to see it. I'd already seen enough. She looked beautiful. She always did. But beauty is different when it's dressed in a memory. You never left. The ceremony had ended. Chairs half emptied, petals scattered on the ground like echoes of vows. I stayed behind the crowd, by the stone archway laced with ivy, far enough not to be seen, close enough to notice details others wouldn't. That was when I saw the dress. Not just any dress, that dress. A slim-cut silhouette of lace and ivory cascading into hand-stitched petals that looked like they had been pulled from a dream. A dream she once whispered to me in a moment so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. It was years ago. We were lying on the floor of our old apartment, flipping through a borrowed bridal magazine just to laugh at over-the-top ceremonies we couldn't afford. She turned a page, and then stopped. Silence. And then, her voice, soft like rain falling on glass. "If I ever get married, I want this one." She touched the photo with the back of her fingers, like it might smudge if she pressed too hard. I looked over her shoulder and saw it, the same gown she now wore today, the one now hugging her waist like a secret meant only for me. Back then, I'd nodded, pretending to forget. But I didn't. Not the dress, not the look in her eyes, not the way she folded the corner of that page and kept it tucked beneath her pillow for weeks. When she got engaged, to him, she never mentioned it again, but I remembered. I remembered her voice that night. I remembered her hands tracing lace with dreams she thought were too expensive to say out loud. So I found the designer. It took nights of scrolling, emails, calls, waiting lists. And finally, an invoice. More than I could afford at once, but I made it work. I always did, when it came to her. I sent the full payment, requested it be marked anonymous, told them to send it through her fiancé's manager, and I asked just one thing: don't attach my name, just make sure she gets that dress. No credit, no thank you, just a memory, stitched in silk. And now, there it was. She stood under the soft haze of golden light, the dress flowing around her like a promise fulfilled. Everyone was watching her. But I was the only one who saw her. She looked radiant, yes, but not because of the gown, because she believed, truly believed, that it had come from him, that he had listened, that he had remembered, that he had paid. But I was the one who had memorized that page, who knew the exact shade of the floral embroidery because she once traced it with a sleepy finger and whispered, "This part feels like home." She'll never know, and maybe that's the point. Love, real love, is the kind that gives without witness, that builds quietly, even after being left behind. But God, it still hurt. To see her twirl in front of the camera, laughter blooming from her lips, posing in a gown that was supposed to be mine to unzip on a night filled with forever. I turned away before the bouquet toss. I didn't want to see who'd catch it. I didn't need to. Somewhere out there, the version of me who couldn't afford that dress was still fighting to become enough. But he'd been replaced by a man who showed up late, but had better timing. That night, I walked home in silence. The city lights blinked like they didn't care. The crosswalk's red hand stayed frozen longer than usual. I stopped in front of a wedding dress boutique. In the window, mannequins stood frozen in gowns of satin and shimmer, all beautiful, none of them hers. I touched the glass with my fingers. It was cold, much like the moment I realized I'd paid for a fairy tale that no longer needed a prince, just a sponsor. And still, if she ever finds that page again, years from now, tucked between old boxes and forgotten seasons, will she remember the dress, or just the man she thought gave it to her? The night before her wedding, the sky was heavy. Not just with clouds, but with the kind of stillness that makes you brace for something you can't name. I sat alone on my sofa, apartment lit only by the blue glow of my laptop screen. The world outside was moving forward, cars humming below, lovers brushing past on sidewalks, a city spinning like it didn't know what tomorrow meant for me. That's when her name lit up my phone, one final time. "I know it's selfish, but I'll always care about you. Please don't hate me." 12 words, 12 paper-thin words trying to soften the steel edge of betrayal. There was no punctuation at the end, no question mark, no period, just space, like even she wasn't sure if it was goodbye or guilt. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then I tapped it back to life, not to reply, just to confirm I hadn't imagined it. She always did that, sent things at night when it was too late to fix anything, but too early to pretend she hadn't meant it. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That I forgave her? That I didn't? Both would have sounded like I was still waiting, still holding the line while she tied the knot on the other end. And the truth was, I had already answered her. In the most painful way a man can, with money. Because even as her message hung in the air like incense after a prayer, meaningless, yet lingering, I was already logging into my banking app. Final transaction, marked, travel, Maldives resort deposit. $3,250,000, wired. No receipt sent. No name attached. Just one last thread she could walk across, while I watched it fray from my side. I remember the irony. How she said, "Please don't hate me," while sipping drinks I paid for on a beach I'd never step on. It wasn't hatred I felt. Not even resentment. It was something colder, more silent. Like the final exhale before sleep, but for a version of me that wouldn't wake up again. She was in his arms now. That night, probably rehearsing vows in a hotel suite, laughing over room service, folding napkins with initials that weren't mine. And I was sitting in a room I paid for, staring at a wall that didn't echo her name anymore. The flowers in the vase beside me had wilted. I hadn't even noticed when. They'd been hers, a remnant of the bouquet she left behind after one of our last arguments. Dried at the edges, still holding on in the middle. I got up, took them gently in my hand, and dropped them into the trash. No drama, no weight. Just release. People always talk about closure like it's something you receive, an envelope sealed with clarity. A conversation, a look, an apology that feels like the full stop at the end of a sentence you've been stuck in. But mine never came. It didn't knock on my door, it didn't ring my phone, it didn't write a letter in trembling handwriting. Mine came with a wired confirmation email, a zeroed-out balance, a message that said success, and a heart that didn't clench anymore when I saw her name. That night, I deleted the chat thread, not out of spite, out of survival. Her messages had become like old photographs left in the sun, faded, curled at the corners, but still capable of hurting you if you stare too long. I didn't sleep much, just lay there, listening to the hum of my refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Every sound felt louder now, like the universe was making space where her silence used to be. By dawn, I made coffee for one, didn't scroll, didn't check her wedding photos. I didn't need to anymore. I knew how the story ended, I just wasn't in it. She'll never know the honeymoon was paid in silence. While she dipped her feet into white sand, I was sweeping the last trace of her from my floor. She'll never know the last thing I gave her wasn't money. It was mercy. The church was beautiful. Too beautiful to feel real. Pale gold sunlight streamed through the stained glass, casting colored shadows that danced along the marble floor. It was the kind of venue you'd see in magazines, the kind she once cut out and pinned to our wall with tape that always curled. She got it. She got everything she ever dreamed of. And now, she stood at the altar. Glowing. Perfect. Untouched by the war we once fought together. I hadn't planned to watch this part. I'd promised myself I'd already said goodbye, but something kept my feet rooted to the cold stone behind the last row of pews, far enough that no one noticed me, close enough that I heard everything. The priest asked her if she had prepared her own vows. She nodded, smiled, and turned to him, the man who stood where I used to imagine myself. Her voice didn't shake, not once. "I promise to love you through all your storms," she said, "to choose you even on the days when the sky feels too heavy to hold." The crowd let out a breathless, soft sound, the kind reserved for romance and reverence. But all I could think was, I was her storm, and she left me in the middle of it. She wasn't lying, not really. She meant those words, probably, meant them now, just not then. Not when I was broke, not when the electricity bill bounced twice, not when I couldn't promise anything more than love and leftovers. She didn't stay through those storms, she ran for shelter, and found it in a man who'd never been drenched by her thunder. I pressed my back against the cold stone wall and closed my eyes. I didn't feel anger, not anymore, just distance. Like she and I were pages from two different books that once got shelved together by mistake. The ceremony moved forward, rings, smiles, applause. But I stopped hearing it. Because that moment, her vow, it wasn't about him, it was about me. A line she'd never said to me about a love she didn't fight for when it counted. And that realization hit harder than I thought it would. But it didn't break me. Not this time. It cleared something. Like a window finally opened in a room that had suffocated me for months. Because I wasn't there to beg fate for answers, I wasn't there to feel sorry, I wasn't even there to mourn her. I was there to end it. Not just the chapter, the entire story. I had paid in silence, funded her dreams, stood alone while she walked hand in hand into another life, but this was the last page, and I got to read it standing tall, not broken, not bitter. I looked down at my hands, steady, no tremble, the same hands that once held her when she didn't know how to breathe through grief, the same hands that sent wire transfers without names attached, the same hands that had let go, even when my heart hadn't. Now, they were just hands, not hers, not waiting, just mine. I stepped back slowly, careful not to make a sound, not because I was afraid, but because ghosts don't get to interrupt the living, they just watch and leave. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, the wind was gentle, there were no signs of rain, the world was still spinning, and this time, I was ready to start moving with it. She'll never know that beneath her vows, hidden in the folds of fabric and floral arrangements, was my name. Not spoken aloud, but stitched into every corner of the ceremony she thought was hers alone. And that's okay, because for the first time, I didn't need to be remembered, to be free. Healing didn't happen all at once, it came in quiet decisions. Small, ordinary choices that didn't scream, "I'm letting go," but whispered, "I'm done bleeding for someone who doesn't look back." The first was unfollowing her, not just on social media, but in my mind. No more checking her stories at midnight, no more searching for her name in comment sections like a ghost trying to haunt its own death. She had a husband now, a new name, maybe, a new chapter, a smile that belonged to someone else. And me? I stopped trying to read between the lines of someone else's vows. I stopped funding silence too. No more anonymous payments, no more last-minute transfers, no more being her safety net when she called it closure. I let the guilt go, the kind that clung to my ribs and whispered that love means always showing up, even when you're no longer welcome at the door. I had given enough, I had given everything, and what I had left, I decided to give to someone who might actually feel seen. The day it changed, really changed, was when I met Malik. 14, slouched posture, eyes always darting to the ground like he expected the floor to reject him too. He reminded me of me. Before the job, before the heartbreak, before I learned how to wear composure like armor. He sat in the last row of the classroom during the mentorship orientation. Didn't speak until the session was almost over. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "How did you stop feeling invisible?" I didn't have an answer right away. Because the truth was, I hadn't, not fully. But I looked at him, and I realized. I didn't need to be seen by her anymore. There were others who needed to see themselves in someone. Someone who had once been left behind, but chose to walk forward anyway. So I poured my time into them. The quiet ones, the forgotten ones. The ones who thought success was a gate locked by circumstance, not courage. Every week, I sat with them, taught them how to build resumes, yes, but also how to believe in their names again, how to stand in rooms that once made them shrink, how to own silence, not fear it. I started speaking at schools, then panels, then conferences. One day, I was handed a plaque, Emerging Leader of the Year. Funny. The boy who once stood outside a wedding he paid for, was now being asked to stand on stages, to talk about resilience, to talk about rising. They didn't know her name, didn't know about the dress, the wire transfers. The night I read her vows from behind a column like a secret. But she would know mine. Because every headline, every mention, every guest speaker intro, carried it. I still remember the first time someone came up to me after a keynote and said, "Your story changed how I see myself." I smiled, nodded. But inside, I was thinking of her. Of how she once told me, "No one listens to men who do." And look the part. I didn't look the part then, but now. Now they write about me. Sometimes I wonder if she ever scrolls past my name, if she sees it on an article, hears it in a podcast. If her husband says, "Didn't you know him once?" and I wonder what she says, if she lies, if she tells the truth, if she says nothing at all. It doesn't matter, because I don't say her name anymore, not in pain, not in memory, not in passing. I buried it with every version of myself that used to wait for her. She found a husband, a life, a new narrative. But I found something better. I found myself. In classrooms filled with kids who don't know my past, in hands raised with questions that matter, in quiet thank yous written on sticky notes left at the edge of a desk. They don't know her, but they know me, and that's enough. She'll be remembered in my story as the chapter that almost ended me, but I'll be remembered in hers as the man who never asked for credit, only gave it, and now I give it to the ones who remind me that the heart doesn't break to stay broken, it breaks so it can grow into something new. Ixi. It arrived on a Thursday, plain envelope, no name on the front, just my address written in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a year. Sharp strokes softened by hesitation. I almost didn't open it. I thought it was another speaking invitation, another feature article, another echo from the life I had started building on my own. But something about the way the paper felt between my fingers, like it carried a heartbeat that had once been familiar, like it had waited too long in the dark to stay sealed much longer. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photo. A print, not digital. Slightly curled at the edges from time, and just like that, I was back in that moment. It was us. From years ago. Taken on the old bridge near the bookstore we used to visit on Sundays. She had her hand on my chest, laughing, eyes closed. I was looking at her, not the camera, like she was the only thing I ever wanted to capture. I remembered that day. Not because it was grand, but because it wasn't. It was quiet. Soft. Unscripted. The kind of day you don't think will be important, until it's the only thing that still feels real. Taped to the back of the photo was a note, just a few lines. "I'm sorry. You were always the one who saw me. I just didn't know how to stay with someone who saw through me." No return address, no name, no request for a reply, just that. I sat down. Not out of shock, not even sorrow, but because something inside me felt still. The kind of stillness that only comes after the storm has passed, after you've already rebuilt the house. Painted the walls, learned to sleep again. Her handwriting hadn't changed, but I had. A year ago, those words would have gutted me. I would have reread them until they tore open the scar I worked so hard to stitch. I would have found meaning in every curve of the S in sorry. I would have dreamed up a version of us that met again, clean and unbroken. But today, I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't text her, I didn't wonder who she was now, because I had nothing left to give her, and everything left to build for myself. There was power in the silence, in not needing closure from the person who cracked you open, in realizing the apology isn't the prize, healing is, and I had earned mine the hard way, not through forgiveness but through foundation, through building something that didn't collapse when she left. I stood and walked to the bookshelf in my study, tucked the photo behind the last page of a journal I hadn't opened in months. Not to keep it, but to bury it. Gently. Like a time capsule, not a shrine. Outside, it had started to snow, not heavy, not loud, just soft flurries floating down like memories that didn't hurt anymore. I made tea, the kind she never liked, sat by the window and watched the street lamps glow through the white. Somewhere out there, she might still say my name in her head, might wonder what would have happened if she'd stayed, if she'd waited one more week, if she'd believed in the storm instead of fearing it. But wondering is hers to carry now, not mine. I'm not waiting at the altar of her apology anymore. I'm not standing behind glass, watching her walk away in dresses I paid for. I'm building things that don't have her name hidden in the seams. The letter came too late, but not for me. Because for the first time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like proof that I had finally, fully, moved on.